Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KMED this weekend. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the real estate guys, with you. I'm a principal broker with John L. Scott. Joe is a broker with John L. Scott Real Estate, and thanks for joining us. You know, we get together with you once a week here on KMED for almost 5 years, or end of 5 years. We'll start our 6th year, actually, in a couple of weeks, every weekend with you. That's a lot of shows, you know, a lot of great guests, a lot of great information for our listeners over these years, and all with the goal of helping you be smart real estate consumers, because it's the biggest investment you're going to make in your life. And boy,
I always say that we and our listeners should get 1 hour of continuing education credit for each of the shows that we produce.
If you listen to our show, you can get your real estate license actually over these 5 years.
30 shows.
30 hours, 60 hours, and then take your test. Yeah. Well, anyway, welcome to our show today. Water's our topic. With, voters back in 2006 supported a small 5-cent property tax levy increase to support the combining of the soil and water conservation districts, and the JSWCD as it's currently configured was born then. And for that $13.50 that I pay every year to support the JSWCD, it is, as I tell everybody, it's the best property tax value that you can get in Jackson County.
Absolutely.
There's no question about that, because their performance and what they have been doing in making us understand how to be good stewards of land and water has been something that we've really watched, Joe, from its beginning, and it's really neat to see what's happening.
Boy, the value it adds to our rural lands and even our urban cityscapes is unmeasurable for the little bit of investment we put into it.
Think in a year with drought, if we didn't have some of this knowledge, how bad it would be around us. Anyway, Paul DiMaggio's let me get it right now, he's the Natural Resource Project Specialist for the JSWCD, is with us in the house, and nice to see you. How are you doing, by the way?
Good, Pete. Good to be here.
You're busy. Now, just tell me what you've been doing. I mean, you out in the field, it's hot out there.
There's a lot of natural resources out there.
There's a lot of natural resources out there. Just an hour ago, I was out in Talent, and we were looking at flood irrigation practices right now. It's the heat of the irrigation season.
Yeah.
And folks are concerned about how much water they're using, how much water's going onto their field, how much water is leaving their field, off into the creeks.
You've been here now 3 years, and you came up here from Cal Poly. It's like a San Luis Obispo grad down there, and you came up
Beautiful
here.
Place.
You've been here almost 3 years now, Paul. Is that the biggest change maybe that you've seen from people that you've dealt with over the years, is that they're more aware of what they're doing, or tell me that?
I would say from what I've experienced is most folks that move up here and are new landowners really want to know exactly what's going on their property. And through that and through the real estate transaction, then we get people that are really interested in what they're putting on their land, what's going off of their land, how they can make it better. They've heard flood irrigation is really inefficient, and it can add or reduce water quality in the local streams. So they come to us, and they're more than happy to address their concerns with us.
And you've actually had, I know you go out onto people's properties, and you've actually built stuff and helped them do this, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we're doing a second study right now, and it's really the only study I know of that's doing this right now, where we're quantifying the flood irrigation coming onto a field, the flood irrigation water going off of the field, and seeing how much temperature, turbidity, E. coli bacteria that water picks up on the field.
Really?
And is then returned back into the streams. And we're getting that efficiency and seeing how different management styles can affect those numbers.
So you're taking, remember we used to irrigate over there at Willow Falls down by Phoenix, and we flood irrigated there. Mm-hmm. So you're saying the water that comes into there now, you can monitor before it goes in, right?
Right next to Bear Creek, you were
right next to the freeway. I mean, it's right there. But you then would, at the end of, after it's done, you then monitor the water quality at the end of it and what goes back, correct?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And through that, we can quantify by improving the grazing management, increasing the pasture management, improving the irrigation water management. We can have some quantifiable number to say, by doing this, we are reducing this much temperature in this creek or this stream.
Well, that's pretty interesting there. Well, that's got to be...
And think property by property, the enhancement that could be achieved. And I know a lot of times neighbors hear from their neighbors, and it starts to kind of spread upstream and downstream.
Oh, yeah. And we've had a great working relationship with all landowners in Jackson County, much thanks to Randy, our manager, who's got his head on straight. And we're non-regulatory, so we can be the first people in the door for a lot of landowners to point them in the right direction for where they want to go.
It's probably the unregulatory part of the JSWCD is why it is so effective, because you're right, you don't have an intimidating a fear factor coming onto your property.
Unregulatory and incredibly resourceful in the people and the connections you can make for folks.
That may not be the case of the person who's joined us here today. Also, Amy Patton, who's a hydrogeologist, and Amy has worked for the DEQ in the past, so that's why I said that. But Amy, nice to have you with us. First of all, you're you call it let me get this back, a hydrogeologist.
That's right.
And just tell people what does that mean?
So it essentially means I'm a groundwater specialist.
Okay.
I studied geology, and I've worked in groundwater pretty much all of my career.
And groundwater is owned. See, in the state of Oregon, groundwater, is owned. Well, a person can own their groundwater if they have a well. It's on your property and stuff like that. So now tell me how you got connected with people like Paul at the Jackson Soil Water Conservation District, because you're kind of an independent business person here. You have a company called Patton Environmental. So how did you get connected with the JSWCD?
Yeah, so I'm a small consulting firm, and I do things like groundwater assessment and contamination assessment and remediation. But I also do work with non-point sources of contamination, which are the kinds of contamination that take place over large areas due to things that don't necessarily come out of a pipe. They're widespread sources. So some of the sources, non-point sources of contamination in the Rogue Basin are things like septic systems. So yes, they come out of a pipe, but it's the widespreadness of them and the density of them.
The failing drain field or the septic that
and multiple failing drain fields or improper soils that cause those to cause groundwater contamination. Generally, when they're working properly, they don't cause groundwater contamination, but in some areas they might. And then another potential source might be an agricultural situation where you might have the proper amount of fertilizer or manure on your field, but maybe you're irrigating too heavily, or maybe you put it on right before a big rainstorm, and the water pushed the fertilizer and the nutrients past the root zone where the crops can't pull them out. And if that happens often enough, it can cause groundwater contamination over a larger area. So we have seen some area-wide nitrate contamination, which is generally a fertilizer or a septic issue in the Rogue Basin. And so I was looking around for a way to get the word out to people that, because there's over 100,000 rural residents in Jackson-Josephine County who depend on private wells for their drinking water supply. And
isn't there something like
that's about a third of our population?
Wells?
That's pretty significant.
It's like 15,000 wells. Isn't there something like that in Jackson County? It's a tremendous number. Anyway.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. A lot of people depend on that water source, and so when you here in the U.S., we're used to turning on the tap and expecting the water to be clean and potable, and private well owners don't really have that same situation. They have to check their own water quality.
They have to do it themselves.
That's right.
Do Paul and Amy, do you find what is the level of contamination that you guys have experienced? Is there, you say it's widespread. Is it, is it everywhere? Is there a lot of it? Or are people unaware of it? Or you're here to say something to people, so I assume that it's a problem or you wouldn't be here.
So I worked with DEQ in 2011, and we conducted a groundwater quality assessment. We got volunteer well owners to volunteer their wells for sampling, and the DEQ went around and did some sampling. We found 47% of the wells that we tested in Jackson County. We only tested 36 wells
okay.
At that time. 47% of those had elevated nitrate levels. So it's a pretty large percentage of the wells.
And is that is it dangerous?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what what the question is. I mean, if see, I've got 47%. I mean, should I be concerned about that? Or okay.
So we consider nitrate to be elevated if you've got over 3 parts per million or milligrams per liter. It's the same thing, just different terminology. That's elevated. The drinking water standard is actually 10 parts per million. So that's the level at which it becomes hazardous for infants, pregnant, nursing women, elderly people, or immunocompromised people. So that's the level where it's of concern for them. For older adults, more healthy adults, take a higher concentration to be of concern. There's some other health effects that could happen from long-term use of elevated nitrate, but that's generally the reason it's regulated is for the sensitive populations.
And what should people do? I mean,
what's become of that? Those findings,
Yeah, and we haven't seen all that many wells over the drinking water standard. I think we only saw about 8% of wells over the drinking water standard.
Now that's a big difference. I mean,
it's a big difference.
From what you originally said,
right.
47. Okay.
The 47% is a concern to me because it means that
they could be on the way.
That's getting elevated.
Get
it's been impacted by something, and if you have that kind of level of nitrate in your well, you might have also bacteria in your well. If you're, depending on what the source is, you might have some pesticides in your well. So it's just an indication that there might be something else getting down there.
And is it possible to clean the well or fix the well to where those levels are back down, or do you filter your waters, or what do people do if they find themselves in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, unfortunately, once the groundwater is contaminated with nitrate in particular, it just doesn't like to come out very easily. So, especially if you get it on an area-wide basis, it's difficult to get rid of. That's why we like to focus on prevention, which is why we
we have Paul JSWCD.
Exactly. They do the good work of working with farmers to get those best management practices in place so that you're reducing those sources.
So you can literally, have a well that is, if you have elevated levels of this or whatever, that it may be worthless to you as far as drinking or using it, right? And you have to use it for something else?
You can drink it. There are treatment systems you can put on if you have high levels. And I have heard a few instances this summer of people with 20, 30 parts per million in their wells. So that's 2-3 times the drinking water standard.
But the concern, if I'm hearing both of you say, is that it may be on the rise even more than where we are today. Is that a fair way to say it?
It's been fairly stable for decades. The part of what I try and do with my work, and I got a couple grants to do some public education events, and we've been doing some free nitrate testing events around the valley where people bring in their water samples and we can test it in 5 minutes and tell them what their sample is. We put on 4 of those events this spring, and Jackson Soil and Water is offering walk-in free nitrate testing every Tuesday morning, 8:30 to 9:30. So if you have a water sample, you can just bring it in to them.
So I can take it out of my well and just bring it down to the JSWCD office there in Central Point across from the Grange Co-op, and you'll test it, right?
Yeah, we'll do a little test and sample if you bring in just a jar. A small sample.
So a jar, that's all I have to bring in out of my well.
Yeah, just a small amount of water there, and then you could bring it out of your well and if you have a holding tank as well. We've seen some different levels, and if you're trying to figure out where your contamination is from, bring it from a couple different points, and we can test each point. It takes a couple minutes, and then we can leave you with some good materials, some good resources to contact or further things to do to address your situation.
Now,
two things.
Okay.
First off, this is a perfect coalition with the JSWCD and your mission, and you picked the right place to go to be able to get out and reach as many people as you possibly can. Really, that's just one of many examples of how that happens. Second thing, I'm thinking of all my friends who have wells. I'm going over the list in my mind right now. I want some samples from those folks. I go out there and visit again.
Yeah.
Check
bring
that
'em-
out.
bring 'em by.
Yeah, but now I know where to go and when to bring those
Yeah.
by, and I can check my friends off well after well.
Perfect. We've been doing it now for
on the rural list.
We've been doing it now for 3 weeks, and it's been going great. So
That's a great resource for folks.
Well, I would think that, in a real estate transaction, when you buy a rural property with a well, you have to have the well tested as part of the real estate transaction. But what if I'm renting, Joe? I mean, thinking about it, what if I'm renting a rural property, or what if I've lived on a rural property for 20 years and the water it's fine. I have never had that tested. It seems to me that those are the types of wells that you want to get to.
Exactly.
Are people who are renters who may not know what their water is like.
Or how long it's been since that well was tested,
Or how
when
long
the
it's
property
been tested.
was transacted.
Because there's a lot of people who are supposed to keep well logs who don't do that, as we find out as when you go to sell them. Oh, yeah, I've got all this stuff. It's here. And no, it's not. And it slows everything down. We've got a break coming up here. We're with Amy Patton, a hydrogeologist, and Paul DiMaggio from the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District today on the Real Estate Show. We'll be coming right back. Don't you dare go away right after this. Real Estate Show rolls on here on KMED this weekend. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the real estate guys, with you. We're talking water today with our good friends from the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. Paul DiMaggio is with us. He's the Natural Resource Project Specialist. And Amy Patton, who's a hydrogeologist and has received some grants from DEQ and things like that, and all talking about groundwater and water quality and all those kinds of things. We have certainly believed, here we are in the middle of 2015, that water and the way we use it is really a precious commodity that the drought has maybe brought on. And in real estate, you talk about what's happening in California. It's a mess. It's a mess.
And it's driving
California.
It's driving California residents north to our border.
Well, it really is. And I think with the summer, first of all, it's going to be a very busy tourist summer because people are leaving California because there's no place to go, and they're going to come north. And you're right, they are moving up because so many people have had it out of that. One of the things that we've done with the JSWCD over the years is talked about, water and rain catchment systems. If you want to make money right now, I would think go to California and install and design rainwater catchment systems in that state, because that's going to be the thing if you want to have a yard or any kind of.
The only thing you'd make more money on is figuring out how to make it rain,
or how to make
in California.
Yeah, you could do that. It just shows, that water is such a precious commodity, and even in our own valley, we've thought of it for years. We got plenty of water. Look at Immigrant Lake and.
Big Butte Springs.
We got Big Butte Springs providing water since the 1920s at 35 million gallons a day. I mean, that's a remarkable resource that we have here. But anyway, things are always changing. Paul DiMaggio, tell me what you got that people need to be aware of in your own yard or in your own place to not, don't have to contribute to this problem.
Right, exactly. So a lot of the rural landowners especially is just that a lot of folks don't know about water rights specifically, and that they think if they don't use it when they have the water, that they're just going to lose it. They're not going to be able to use it. But the reality is that if you don't use it for 5 years, then you have the potential to lose your water right.
Lose it.
If you're in a rural area pulling off of an irrigation district or pumping out of a river.
And people can also sell their water right. I was down at the Talent Irrigation District office, a few weeks ago, and there's people seeking. I should say that a few. I shouldn't say you can buy water right. There's tons and tons of people who are trying to buy water rights, but not many people are selling them. And the price for those water rights have gone skyrocketing. That was $10,000 for an acre. It's really beginning. We're beginning to see this.
So another way to protect your water and to protect the water quality is, instead of just dumping it on your field to keep your water right, you don't have to do that anymore. You can, what they call an in-stream lease. It can be temporary, it can be 6 months, it can be a year, it could be a couple years. And basically they're using that water, beneficially using it, but they're just keeping it in stream for aquatic habitat. Mm-hmm. And then if you do that 1 year, you have 5 more years that you don't have to use that water until you need to do something with it. Mm-hmm. Put it in stream or irrigate with it.
Because the more water you leave and you don't use is more water for fish, for stream flows, right? Isn't that
exactly,
what that
exactly.
is? Okay.
And the more water that's in these water bodies will decrease the pollution loads.
Yeah.
So it's really a good point to get across to folks when we talk to them is that, you don't just have to put it across your property if you're not getting anything beneficial from it.
Mm-hmm. Amy, what do you tell people who live in town, for example, in the urban areas here? For example, Joe over here, he lives in Medford, and in Medford, and water is so cheap in Medford that he uses water like crazy. I mean, they use a lot of water.
Pete sounds a little bitter about the whole issue of Ashland and
because
Medford
I live
water.
in Ashland and I have no water. I have very little water. But I'm saying, how can people? I mean, he waters a lot of stuff, and a lot of people do, obviously. Are they contributing to this problem of water quality in their own yards, even though they may not be aware of it?
Sure. Homeowners can use too much fertilizer just as much as, farmers or rural residents can use too much fertilizer. And in fact, I think homeowners are probably more guilty of it than the agriculturalists who, pay more closer attention to the rules. What happens in urban areas is that you don't have as many users of the water, so you don't have as many people who are impacted by that. But you can still have an impact to, one of the beneficial uses of groundwater is to recharge the streams. Groundwater is kept at a cool temperature under the soil, and as it moves through the soil, it stays cool clear into the summer, and it's a real critical resource for recharging streams in the hot summer months when the snow's all long melted. And where's the water in the streams come from? Well, a lot of it comes from groundwater. And so you can, if your water is contaminated in urban areas or rural areas, you can be adding contamination to those streams from your groundwater source.
Boy, lots of things to think about when how we use water. So, what's your advice to people here? I mean, what are we trying to get them? I know you're trying to do an education thing and trying to make us aware of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do we want them to do? Is there?
Well, so, first I think it's important to test. And we talked about testing for nitrates, and that we use nitrate as an indicator that something might be getting into your well that shouldn't be getting there, and therefore there might be other things getting into it as well. But we really recommend that people test for bacteria annually, because bacteria is something that's generally a localized contamination thing. It can be getting down your well casing. It can be coming from localized sources. So that's something to, that can crop up out of nowhere, and you want to take care of it. We also in this area have naturally occurring arsenic, and we have naturally occurring fluoride, and it's really important. That's another thing some people aren't aware of, especially new rural residents or out-of-state, people moving in.
Who would think you're buying property with arsenic
Right.
in your groundwater?
Right. And people think, well, fluoride, what's the big deal? We're supposed to have fluoride, but you can have too much, and, it won't cause you health problems, although it could cause you brittle bones. That's a possibility if you have too high levels, but it causes cosmetic issues with your teeth, and particularly for kids under 8 and under. So it's just important to know how much you have in your well before you start giving your kids fluoride pills or that kind of thing.
You may not have to do that after the whole thing. Well, it's.
But the other thing we like to tell people with septic systems is, be careful what you're putting down a septic system, especially, again, if you've got people moving from an urban area to a rural area. They're used to putting stuff in the sewer and not thinking twice about it. But a septic system is kind of a delicately balanced system. You can't have too much water. You can't have too little water. You can't put too much chlorine down there. You don't want to be putting your paint thinner down there or washing your paintbrushes. You just have to be careful. You got to keep the bacteria alive, and you've got to make sure your system is pumped probably every 2 to 4 years.
That's why I live in the city.
Well, the thing is, if you don't do those things when you go to sell that property, it now undergoes a much thorough inspection of the septic systems than it was. Some of the new rules that happened. And, our good friend Jim Studi, I'll never forget that story. He says, you got a septic tank. Oh, I've lived here for years. It's works great.
It's golden.
I've never had any problems. It's wonderful until the inspection came. And, I think it was, $1,800 later, he was able to sell the property. So the septic failure, if it fails, really seems to me to would cause the biggest amount of problems that a person can do. Your person is going to contribute to the contaminants around you. Is that
they recommend when you're putting in a septic system that you leave a whole big area for replacement drain field. But I think a lot of the people who, buy that property secondhand don't realize that this big empty field, with no trees and no bushes is meant for a replacement field, and they go and, develop it or plant trees on it, and then you have a problem when you need to replace your drain field.
Yeah, those roots are going to be there, and you got some, I can't even imagine.
Not our friends.
And it makes for the good case of, why we have a lot of the sewage. The Rogue Valley sewer system delivers in a lot of rural areas. I wish Medford Water Commission would deliver in rural areas more to stop this problem that we're seeing, the contaminants. But the contaminants are still there. Fish still get them, and animals get it as well. So it's a complex problem, isn't it?
You should go speak to the Water Commission and make your feelings known to them.
Yeah, that would be... Oh, I get a great reception there. I can hear that already. Hey, the Real Estate Show on KMED. We're coming right back after this. Real Estate Show continues here on KMED this weekend. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett with you, and thanks for joining us here on the Real Estate Show as summer rolls along as well. And gee, we finish 5 years of our shows next week, and in July we start year number 6. I was young when we started this. I was really a young guy.
Ooh, I think they call that a stretch in our business.
Lots of, well, my goodness, all this stuff we
were
talked
younger.
about. Younger.
We can safely say that.
Well, next week, Glenn Cunningham, a CPA from Nagel and Padilla, will be here once a year. Glenn comes and talks about real estate-related investments and taxes and all those kind of things that I'm sure you want to hear with us next week.
Cheapest visit we have with Glenn all year.
Always like it when he comes. 2 weeks from today.
Otherwise, we have to pay a lot to talk to him.
2 weeks from today, Representative Sal Esquivel will be in along. We'll talk about the Oregon legislature and kind of as they finished their work in terms of what happened in real estate. Remember, last week we had the Sean Cleaves, who was the lobbyist for the Oregon Association of Realtors, talk about those crazy bills that they introduced in Salem. I mean, up there about, I'm sorry, but mortgage interest deduction is not going to go away because the group in Salem think that they want to use it to raise more money for taxes or whatever. Yeah. It just seems to be crazy to me that they keep bringing that up when you've got the lobbyists out there are all there, and it's not going to.
Show with Sal will be a 7-hour show, so we can aptly cover all the topics that need to be addressed.
Well, today we're talking with Paul DiMaggio, the Natural Resource Project Specialist from the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, and Amy Patton, a hydrogeologist who's working with the district in terms of water quality and trying to bring awareness to the issues
of practices,
wells and water and how we use it. And you want to have good, clean water. We all want that. That's for sure. So, Paul, one of the things that the district has done always is that you go out to people's places, and you're still doing that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And now we actually have a new planner on staff, Clint Nichols, and he will be now the new point of contact. If you call the district, if you're a rural landowner, you talk to Clint, and he will set up a time to come out to your site, come visit your property at whatever time you like for usually an hour or 2 hours. And then he can work on getting resources for you, answering your questions, pointing you in the right direction, printing out maps, creating plans for you at no extra cost. All in the name of protecting the county's natural resource concerns. Mm-hmm. And then I come along later as if you have any irrigation-specific type questions, I can come and help you out with those at, again, no extra charge.
And you know what Paul has seen over these 3 years that he's been here? A lot of flood irrigation has changed to low-impact sprinklers, which we've seen the great results of those.
They've improved yields, improved water quality, improved land values.
Yeah, improved yields is huge.
I mean, that just makes so much sense. Everybody should be doing that. Why aren't you doing that? Or why aren't you calling Paul and asking him all of that out?
Right, and in the next 20 years, that may be the wave of the future. Everyone will be on sprinklers, and no one will be on flood irrigation.
And maybe people will have maybe no septic systems, and wells will have been replaced a lot of times, maybe with more domestic water. Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, Amy Patton, what do you got cooking for people? What should they do? How can they get a hold of you in your world?
Well, I'm just on contract with Jackson Soil and Water for the year, and we're going to be putting on a couple more free nitrate testing events in the fall. We don't have them scheduled yet, but they'll be in the Rogue Valley. And they come accompanied with a 1-hour class where we talk. Someone from Jackson Soil and Water comes and talks about best management practices, and I talk about wells and septic systems. And so be on the lookout for those classes coming up. And
it will be interesting.
Get my rule.
Well, I was going to say a quarter of all real estate sales in Jackson and Josephine counties are classified as rural properties, rural residential, rural properties, 1 acre or more. And that equates to, at least in Jackson County, about 500 new people living on a rural property who weren't there a year ago. You had 500 the year before, 500 the year before. Pretty soon it adds up to a few people who are living on these rural properties with septics and wells. Amy, as you say, they may not have any idea sometimes of what they're even doing or where they're at. So this is really a time for them to get with us and understand that. I'm
going to send my friends with wells to jswcd.org after the 4th of July to check for those dates.
Yeah, and come in every
Very
Tuesday from 8:30 to 9:30, bring a well sample and get that tested.
And Amy, how can they get a hold of you if someone wants to talk to you?
Yeah, well, I can give you my number. It's 541-690-9983.
All right. Well, we wish you well with that. Good luck with that. You know, that's quite a challenge because we have so many different property types and soil types, as you say, in our county. It's almost like land use, the way this land use is one thing, and soil and water underneath there is a whole other topic. What, do you agree with that?
I have to agree with that. Yeah. That's a pretty important resource.
Yeah. And I also want to say, Paul, the JSWCD camps are underway now. We're in June, and I know that starts next week, I believe, the Forest Day Camp.
Yeah, next Monday, the Forest and Range Day Camp starts for a full week of activities and fun for, I think, 5th through 7th graders. Yeah. And they just get a great opportunity to see folks that are using the natural resources on their land sustainably and in an economically viable, environmentally friendly way, from right next to the stream to up in the forest. And they get a really good chance to see what we can do with our natural resources.
Those kids are learning, best practices as just a way of life. It's really cool. The 4-H and the FFA programs, and some of the opportunities that are created, the education that comes with those is outstanding. And you keep their little brains from going to mush during the summers. And parents and grandparents really like that, too. It's really good stuff for them.
That's right. And then we finished off with a nice barbecue at Immigrant Lake. So everyone wins.
I hope they have the natural resource tours that they have, were really popular.
Yeah, you've been on one. Yeah.
I thought those were some of the coolest things I've ever been on.
Showcases of success stories.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more plug, actually a plug for the Medford Water Commission. I've been working with them on a project to put together an agricultural chemical collection program. And so this is to get that jug of DDT or those chemicals that you can no longer use on your property out of your barn, out of the corner of the old property that you just purchased. Bring it to, we don't have the location yet, but we'll have it. It'll be in February of next year, and we'll get lots of information out to people.
It's like old paint, old pesticides. Yeah. Get rid of them. They leak. Get rid of that
haven't handled properly.
You don't need it. Well, thank you all, guys. Once again, we learn a lot about natural resources in wish you well. JSWCD.org is the website for the district. I also wanted to say, we talked last week briefly. Paul Shoemaker talked about the RESPA changes coming up on August the 1st. We had some calls over the week of that, and I just want to tell you that has now been moved to October the 1st. So any of those changes regarding the way you close a transaction, it's not going to happen on August the 1st. It's going to go to October. We'll have a show on that later about what that actually means for consumers.
Yeah, a lot of people are in contract are going to be shortly that will affect, and they'll be happy for that.
That'll do it for the Real Estate Show today on KMED. Pete and Joe, thanks for joining us. Have a great week, everybody. Don't forget YouTube or realestateshoworegon.com and watch all of our shows. Have a great week, and God bless everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Original Real Estate Show with Pete Belcastro and Joe Brett, the Real Estate Guys. For advice, guidance, or counsel on any of our topics, or to watch a replay of today's show, visit our website at realestateshoworegon.com. This show is sponsored by RE/MAX, Ideal Brokers of Southern Oregon, Ticor Title, All Cities Property Management, and the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. We'll continue our weekly quest to enhance the value of your property and to make you a smart real estate consumer when we gather every Saturday and Sunday on KMED for the one and only Original Real Estate Show.